Mai walked slowly on the small path leading to her modest one-story house. The night was late, and the moonlight shimmered faintly through the tree branches, blending with the cold, sharp wind of winter. On her shoulder was a basket filled with damp clothes she had just washed for a wealthy family. Her thin, calloused hands trembled from the cold. The old, patched sweater she wore was not enough to keep her warm, but Mai kept walking without a single complaint. Life as a widow at the age of 37 was not easy, but she was used to the hardships ever since her husband passed away 5 years ago. Her husband, Tan, had been a diligent construction worker, but a sudden workplace accident had taken him away from her. That day, as she held her husband's cold, lifeless body, Mai thought her own life had ended too. But she did not allow herself to collapse. With nothing but her bare hands, she began doing any work she could find, from washing clothes and selling lottery tickets to collecting scrap, whatever it took to survive. Her small house at the end of the poor village was run down, but it was still her refuge whenever she felt exhausted. That night, Mai had just finished her work at the wealthy lady's house in the village. Though it was late, she had to complete it early so she would have time to sell lottery tickets the next day. The sound of the wind whistling through the trees and dry leaves rustling along the road reminded her that winter had truly arrived. She tightened the thin scarf around her neck and quickened her steps toward home. When she reached the small bridge over the shallow river, a faint sound made her stop. At first, she thought it was the cry of a stray cat in the dead of night. But as she listened more closely, her heart tightened. It wasn't a cat, it was the cry of a baby. Mai looked around in the dim darkness. The cry seemed to come from the riverbank beneath the bridge. Ignoring her fatigue and the cold, she hurried down the slope, her eyes straining to see. Under the pale moonlight, she spotted a basket covered tightly and placed precariously on the damp ground. The crying came from inside. Mai bent down and carefully opened the basket. The sight that met her left her frozen in place. 2 tiny newborn babies, fragile and weak, lay huddled inside thin cloths. Their skin was pale blue from the cold, their little lips trembling as if pleading for help. A gust of icy wind blew past, making them shiver. Their cries grew weaker, so faint they seemed about to stop. Mai knelt down, tears streaming uncontrollably. Who could be so heartless as to abandon these helpless little lives on such a cold winter night? Without a second thought, she removed the only scarf she had and wrapped it around the babies to keep them warm. Gently lifting them, she felt their fragile breaths against her chest. "Don't be afraid, my children," Mai whispered, her voice trembling. "I won't let you be cold anymore." Though she knew she didn't have the strength or means to care for 2 more lives, Mai couldn't walk away. Her heart had been touched by their vulnerability and helplessness. She quickened her pace toward home, ignoring the biting cold that numbed her fingers. The 2 babies lay still in her arms, seemingly soothed by her warmth, their eyes closing in a fitful sleep. When she reached her small house, Mai carefully placed the babies on her old, small bed. The room, empty except for a broken-legged table and a few dented pots, now felt full of life. The babies' breathing became steady, and their tears had dried. Mai lit an oil lamp, its pale yellow glow illuminating their tiny pink faces. She sat by the bed, staring at them for a long time. "Their mother must have faced something terrible to do this," Mai murmured, her eyes filled with sorrow. "But from now on, you won't be alone. I'll be your mother, no matter how poor we are." Mai named the babies Lily and Rose. Lily, the older sister, had big round eyes that sparkled with curiosity when she opened them to look at Mai. Rose, the younger one, was smaller and often slept peacefully, with a faint smile that gave Mai a glimmer of hope in her otherwise bleak life. That night, Mai didn't sleep. She sat by the bed, occasionally leaning down to check the baby's breathing. Fear and anxiety consumed her. She didn't know how she would manage now, with the added burden of caring for these 2 tiny lives. But every time she looked at their little hands, she felt a miraculous strength urging her to keep going. The next morning, Mai carried Lily and Rose to the village clinic to check their health. Villagers began to gossip when they saw her with the 2 babies. Some were suspicious, others curious, but there were also those who showed sympathy. "Mai, where did you find these little ones?" the shopkeeper nearby asked. Mai recounted everything, her voice trembling with emotion. After hearing her story, some people sighed and shook their heads. You're already struggling so much, and now you've taken on 2 more mouths to feed. How will you manage? Their words pierced Mai's heart like daggers. But she only smiled softly. I couldn't abandon them. They're my children now. The doctor at the clinic informed Mai that Lily and Rose were severely malnourished and needed special care. Hearing this, Mai became even more anxious. The little money she earned each day was barely enough for watery porridge. Now she would need to buy milk, warm clothes, and medicine for the babies. But instead of feeling fear, Mai felt her determination grow stronger. Back home, Mai gathered her meager savings from an old wooden box and went to the market to buy milk and some warm clothes for Lily and Rose. The money wasn't enough, so she bought the cheapest items she could find. But she promised herself that at least her children wouldn't go hungry or cold. In the days that followed, Mai's life changed completely. The washing and lottery selling, already exhausting, became even harder now that she had to care for the babies. Some nights, she stayed up all night comforting Rose when she cried endlessly. Lily often woke up hungry in the middle of the night, forcing Mai to get up and prepare milk. But every time she saw the 2 little ones sleeping peacefully, Mai felt all her sacrifices were worth it. Neighbors began noticing Mai's small family. Some continued to gossip, but others showed kindness and offered help. Mrs. Han, a middle-aged woman who lived next door, often brought over leftover food or old clothes for the babies. Mai, you're such a good person, Mrs. Han said. God won't forget your kindness. Keep trying and things will get better. Mai was moved by Mrs. Han's kindness and the support of others in the village. Though life remained difficult, she no longer felt alone. Lily and Rose were her greatest motivation to keep living and fighting against adversity. Mai looked at the innocent eyes of the 2 children and saw a future. Not an easy one, but one filled with hope. She promised herself that even if it meant sacrificing everything, she would raise them to be good people. To her, Lily and Daisy were not just abandoned children, they were the most precious gifts life had given her. Mai's life with Lily and Daisy entered a new chapter, where challenges kept coming, but love and warmth also filled their days. Day by day, Mai carefully took care of every meal and every sleep for her 2 daughters. She poured all her love and sacrifices into them. But life was never easy, especially for a poor widow like Mai. Her mornings began very early, before the sky had even lightened. She would wake up to prepare thin porridge for herself and milk for Lily and Daisy. The 2 children grew bigger, ate more, and started crying more frequently. Lily was lively, always smiling whenever she saw her mother, but also demanded a lot of attention. Daisy, on the other hand, was quiet, but when she got sick, she would cry persistently through the night. In those moments, Mai would hold Daisy close, gently singing lullabies that her own mother had sung to her as a child. Her voice wasn't beautiful, but in the quiet of the night, it felt like a soothing medicine that lulled the 2 children to sleep. Although she deeply loved her children, Mai couldn't escape the pressures of life. Money was growing tighter. The cost of milk, diapers, and medicine for the 2 children drained her, forcing her to work harder to earn more. She started taking on laundry work at night. Many times, she had to soak her thin hands in icy cold water until they were red and raw. The small coins she held in her hands felt heavier than her strength could bear. But Mai never allowed herself to stop working, because every time she saw the sparkling eyes of Lily and Daisy, she reminded herself that all her efforts were worth it. The neighbors' gossip continued. Some looked at her with admiration, but many spoke with cruelty, saying things like, "She's so poor, yet she dares to adopt children, doesn't even know her own limits." Whenever she heard such remarks, Mai stayed silent and didn't argue. At night, sitting alone by the dim oil lamp, she often wondered if she was truly doing the right thing. But then, the innocent gazes of the 2 children, their tiny hands clutching hers as they slept, gave her the answer she needed. She knew that no matter how hard life became, she could never abandon them. One night, Daisy developed a high fever. Her small body burned like fire, her lips were dry, and her breathing weak. Mai panicked, wrapping Daisy in an old scarf and running several miles to the nearest clinic. The cold night stung her feet as she stumbled over small stones, but she didn't stop running. When she finally arrived, she was on the verge of collapse. The doctors immediately attended to Daisy, while Mai slumped into a chair, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't afraid of hardship or poverty, but her greatest fear was losing the two children she had worked so hard to protect. Thankfully, Daisy recovered after a few days of treatment. Watching her daughter sleep peacefully on the hospital bed, Mai silently thanked the heavens. That night, she sat by Daisy's side, holding her tiny hand tightly, afraid that if she let go, she might lose her child. When they returned home, Mai threw herself into work even more, trying to repay the medical debts she had borrowed. Every time she felt exhausted, she reminded herself that she wasn't allowed to give up because she was everything to Lily and Daisy. Despite their poverty, small joys lit up their lives every day. Lily and Daisy started crawling, then standing, and eventually taking their first steps. Every wobbly step they took was a source of pride for Mai. On rainy days, the three of them would sit together in their tiny house. Lily played with old plastic bowls, while Daisy sat quietly watching Mai fold clothes. Mai often told them fairy tales, though her voice sometimes broke from exhaustion. But when she heard the cheerful giggles of her daughters, her heart felt lighter. A significant milestone in Mai's motherhood journey was when Lily and Daisy turned 3 years old. That was when she decided to enroll them in preschool, even though it meant working extra hours to afford the tuition. On their first day of school, Lily was excited, running and jumping everywhere, while Daisy clung tightly to Mai's hand, refusing to let go. Mai had to gently console her, promising to come back to pick her up, before Daisy finally loosened her grip. That entire day, Mai worked with her mind constantly on her daughters, worrying if they were crying or being teased by other kids. And just as she feared, the first days of school were not easy for the sisters. Lily was teased for wearing old clothes, and Daisy often sat quietly in a corner, not engaging with anyone. One day, the teacher called Mai to share that some students had called Lily and Daisy orphans. Hearing this, Mai felt her heart break. She didn't blame the children, but she didn't know how to protect her daughters from the cruel indifference of society. That night, Mai saw Lily curled up in a corner and Daisy unusually quiet. She decided to talk to them. Pulling both girls into her arms, she spoke softly but tearfully. "My loves, life isn't easy, but always remember that I love you more than anything in this world. No matter what others say, as long as we're together, we can overcome anything." Lily looked up with teary eyes but then smiled. "Mom, I love you so much. I promise to be good and study hard." Daisy, though silent, nodded firmly, her eyes shining with determination. From that day on, the sisters worked harder, not just in their studies, but also in helping Mai with small chores around the house. Whether it was picking vegetables, folding clothes, or tidying up, their efforts warmed Mai's heart. She realized that her love and care had nurtured children who knew how to love and share. Mai continued to work tirelessly to raise her daughters. One time, she took on the daunting task of washing heavy blankets for a wealthy family in the village. Her hands became numb and bled from soaking in water for too long. But every night, when she saw her two daughters sleeping soundly, she felt all her sacrifices were worth it. She felt that all her hardships melted away. She always believed that as long as she didn't give up, tomorrow would be better. Then one day, an unexpected joy came to her little family. A restaurant owner near her house, who often saw Ms. May struggling with her work, decided to gift her some food and new clothes for Rose and Lily. "I know you've had a tough time, but you are a wonderful mother," the woman said. "Keep holding on to your faith, Miss May." Those words of encouragement were like a warm flame that lit up her heart. Despite the ongoing challenges in life, Miss May always felt grateful to be the mother of Rose and Lily. To her, as long as she could see her two daughters grow up healthy and strong, all the hardships seemed lighter. She silently vowed that no matter how long and arduous the road ahead might be, she would keep walking. After all, it was the path she chose for her unconditional love. As time passed, Rose and Lily grew under Miss May's devoted care. From two fragile, abandoned children left by the riverside, they had now become beautiful and healthy little girls. Their small and modest home, though lacking valuable items, was always filled with laughter and warmth. For Miss May, the years of watching her daughters grow were full of challenges, but also overflowing with meaning and love. Rose and Lily began to show their unique personalities. Rose was energetic and lively, always eager to help her mother with little tasks. She often chatted with everyone around, creating a cheerful atmosphere. In contrast, Lily was quiet and introspective. She enjoyed sitting alone, holding a pencil to draw, or arranging her toys creatively. Despite their different personalities, the sisters loved and clung to each other dearly, rarely leaving one another's side. While Miss May worked, Rose and Lily often played nearby, creating beautiful memories that she always cherished. However, life wasn't always peaceful. When Rose and Lily turned 8 and started attending school officially, financial challenges grew. Miss May had to work day and night to pay for their tuition, books, and clothes. There were days when she worked herself to exhaustion, her hands blistered and bleeding from washing thick blankets. Yet each time she saw Rose and Lily proudly showing their first high scores, Miss May felt that all her sacrifices were worthwhile. Even so, the world outside was not always kind to children from impoverished backgrounds. At school, Rose and Lily began facing teasing from classmates. "Look, the sisters from the poor house," a child in their class often jeered, making Lily's face flush red with embarrassment and silence. Rose, with her strong personality, did not hesitate to respond. "We may be poor, but our mom is amazing," she retorted. Yet, when Rose returned home, she couldn't hide her tears. She snuggled into her mother's arms and shared her pain. Miss May listened quietly, her heart aching as if it were being torn apart. That night, after the two had fallen asleep, she sat alone in the corner of the room. The dim oil lamp cast a faint light on her troubled face. She wondered if she had done enough for her daughters, whether her love could compensate for the hardships they endured. But then, she resolved not to let sadness consume her. She taught her daughters to be proud of their circumstances and not let others' words hurt them. From then on, every evening, the three of them would sit together. Miss May would recount the story of how she found Rose and Lily. She always emphasized that her daughters were the most precious gifts life had given her. These stories not only helped the children understand her love, but also made them stronger. At the age of 10, Rose and Lily began achieving their first successes. Rose participated in a school music competition and won first place with a song praising mothers. Her performance on stage, with her pure voice resonating, moved the entire auditorium. Meanwhile, Lily, though less talkative, displayed a talent for drawing. Her painting of a hard-working mother was displayed in a small school exhibition and received much praise. When they brought home their first prize, a pack of seasoning and a carton of milk, the two sisters excitedly showed it to their mother, making Miss May tear up with happiness. But hardships never truly left their small family. When Rose and Lily turned 12, a severe illness struck Miss May. Her body, which had endured countless burdens over the years, began to rebel. She was bedridden with a persistent high fever, unable to work. For the first time, Rose and Lily realized their mother wasn't invincible, as they had always thought. The two sisters divided the household chores. Rose took charge of grocery shopping and cooking, while Lily cleaned the house. They even taught themselves to cook, though the small kitchen was often filled with the smell of burnt food. One evening, as Miss May lay in bed watching her daughters clumsily bring her a bowl of porridge, her heart filled with both sorrow and immense pride. She realized her once little girls had grown so much, not just physically but also emotionally. After weeks of attentive care, Miss May gradually recovered and returned to work. However, she learned to listen to her body and no longer pushed herself to the brink of collapse. Time flew by, and soon Rose and Lily turned 15. They were no longer just emotional support for Miss May, but also her solid pillars. They actively participated in school activities and often brought home small prizes that helped ease the financial strain. Lily, with her patience and dedication, started tutoring younger children in the village to earn extra money for school supplies. Whenever they had money, the sisters would save it to buy small gifts for their mother, like a new scarf or a fragrant tea pack. Though life was still challenging, the love and bond in their family of 3 remained their driving force. In the evenings, after a long day of work, the three would sit together, sharing stories and laughter. Miss May often told her daughters about her modest dream, to see them grow into happy and meaningful lives. Rose would often say, "Mom, I'll study hard so I can buy you a beautiful house someday." Lily, though quieter, would place her hand on her mother's shoulder and softly promise, "I'll always be by your side, Mom." These simple promises were all Miss May needed to continue her journey. In her heart, her love for her daughters was not just her motivation, but also the guiding light through the difficult years. She knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other, just as they had through all the tough times. 25 years passed like the blink of an eye. Ms. May, once a young but struggling woman, was now 62. The marks of time were etched deeply on her face, her eyes full of wrinkles but still shining with determination. Their small house, once leaky and worn, had transformed into a cozy and well-built home filled with memories. Rose and Lily had grown up, each following their own path but carrying an unbounded love for their mother. Rose had become a famous singer, known to millions for her soulful voice and songs about motherhood. Her compositions often reflected her own story, of a single mother who gave her all to raise two children. Lily, unlike her sister, chose a quieter path. She became a talented architect, designing structures imbued with culture and love. With their success, the sisters took turns supporting their mother. Yet they always knew that their love and respect for her were the true treasures of their lives. A mother's love cannot be measured by anything. That day, a bright spring day filled with sunshine, flowers, and the scent of lotus, they returned to the village. It wasn't an ordinary visit. They had planned a special gift for their mother, a gift that both had been preparing for months. When they stepped into the house, the two sisters saw Mrs. May sitting on the veranda, her eyes gazing out toward the familiar village road. She wore a simple outfit and held a small cloth in her hand, embroidering it delicately. Her expression seemed lost in memories of days gone by. "Mother, we're home!" Rose called out loudly, her voice echoing through the small courtyard. Mrs. May was startled and turned around, a gentle smile spreading across her face as she saw her two daughters. She put the cloth down, stood up, and opened her arms wide to embrace the two children she cherished as her treasures. Rose hugged her mother tightly, tears streaming down her radiant face. Lily, though less expressive, couldn't hide her joy as she leaned down to kiss her mother's cheek. "You both came without telling me, so I couldn't prepare anything," Mrs. May said, her voice full of loving reproach. "You've gotten thinner, haven't you? Working too hard?" "No, Mother, we're fine," Lily replied softly. "We came today to spend time with you." After a warm and cozy lunch, Rose and Lily led their mother out to the yard, where a car was waiting. "Mother, we have a surprise for you today," Rose said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "A surprise? What is it?" Mrs. May asked, puzzled. "Just come with us and you'll see," Lily said with a gentle smile, taking her mother's hand and helping her into the car. The car rolled through familiar village roads, crossing a small bridge where years ago Mrs. May had first found the two children. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting patterns on Mrs. May's face, stirring memories that came rushing back. After about half an hour, the car stopped in front of a spacious plot of land with a beautiful two-story house glowing in the afternoon light. Mrs. May looked at the house in disbelief, unable to trust her eyes. "Mother, this is the gift we wanted to give you," Rose said, her voice choking with emotion. "This house is what you truly deserve after all your sacrifices." Mrs. May raised her hands to cover her mouth as tears poured from her eyes. "How can I accept such a big gift from you two?" she said, turning to her daughters, her voice trembling. "Mother, you gave your entire life to give us a home," Lily said, holding her mother's hand tightly. "Now we just want to repay what you've done for us. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. Just live happily." The three of them walked into the new house. Inside, every corner had been thoughtfully designed by Rose and Lily. In the living room, a large painting hung on the wall. It was an oil painting, hand-painted by Lily, depicting a young woman with drenched hair cradling two infants in the rain. The scene recreated the fateful moment years ago when Mrs. May had brought Rose and Lily home for the first time. "Do you remember this, Mother?" Lily asked softly, This was the day our lives began to change. May stood before the painting, her trembling hands tracing each brushstroke. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of overwhelming happiness. She turned and hugged her two daughters tightly. "I don't need anything else," she said. "Just having you two happy is all I could ever wish for." That evening, Rose hosted a small party, inviting their mother's neighbors and close friends to celebrate together. During the party, Rose stood up, holding a microphone, and began singing a song she had written just for her mother. Each note rang out as a heartfelt tribute to the woman who had spent her life loving and protecting two children she hadn't even given birth to. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause and quiet tears rolled down many cheeks. Rose handed the microphone to her mother. "Mother, would you like to say something?" Mrs. May, though always modest and reserved, mustered the courage to stand up this time. She looked around, her tear-filled eyes meeting each face in the room.